You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and obviously I am mindful of what happened 19 years ago today on that eerily picturesque Tuesday when the world changed forever. We will never forget what happened that day. The senseless loss of innocent lives is a wound that we still carry today. And I find it almost poetic, in a sense, that this Patriot Day in 2020 is happening during a pandemic. And I don't mean that in a bad way. The animals who carried out those attacks thought that they would bring America to its knees. That we wouldn't do what we needed to do to keep this country and our allies abroad safe. And what I mean by this being poetic is we rebuilt after 9/11. Did our lives change? Of course they did. But eventually we got back to normal. One World Trade Center stands tall in Lower Manhattan as a symbol of America's resiliency. And when you look at what's happening now with the coronavirus, we're slowly getting back to normal. Sports are back. Jobs are back. Have some been lost forever? Of course. But people are going back to work. People are being allowed to eat at restaurants or go to sporting events. That spirit of American resiliency came out in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, and it's coming out now in response to this terrible pandemic. That's the moral of the story. You may knock us down, whether it's a virus, a terrorist attack, or a surprise attack on our military base. We've always recovered. We've always triumphed. We won World War II. We won the war on terror. And we're gonna beat this virus. You know why? Because Americans are strong. We don't accept defeat. You may knock us down, but we're always, and I mean always, gonna get back up. At the end of the show, you're gonna get the interview that I did with Rebecca Edwards, the author of the book about deaf players in Major League Baseball. I had a really good time talking to her. She was very funny. I really learned a lot. But I have to start with the NBA. And the Lakers putting their foot on the throat of the Rockets. And this was a really impressive win for the Lakers. We think of them as a top-heavy team, led by 2 stars and a bunch of schmageggies. Well, those schmageggies showed up. The Lakers had 6 players score in double figures. Anthony Davis had a double-double, 29 and 12. LeBron James nearly had a triple-double, 16, 15, and 9. Here's the thing about LeBron. And this is the thing with all dominant players. Even when they're having an off night, they're not scoring as well as they should. They find a way to contribute. And that's what LeBron did. He shot 0 for 5 from beyond the arc, but he nearly had a triple-double. 16 points, 15 rebounds, and 9 assists. He out-rebounded Davis. KCP and Danny Green each had 10 points. Alex Caruso had 16. Rajon Rondo, off the bench, nearly had a triple-double. 11, 10, and 8. Playoff Rajon Rondo. I'm telling you. There's some players that when the lights are on bright, they just take it to another level. It defies all logic, but it's the truth. This was a really impressive Lakers win. It sets them up really well for their eventual series against the Clippers. The Rockets really have no chance. I didn't think they were terrible in this game. You want to tell me that James Harden should have shot better than 2 for 11 from the field and 1 for 6 from beyond the arc? You're right. You're 100% right. But this is what Harden does that I love. When he knows he's not shooting well, he gets to the free throw line a lot more. Now, he gets to the free throw line anyway, even when he's shooting well, but when he's not shooting well, he gets to the free throw line more. He attempted 20 free throws in this game. The Lakers, the whole team, in this whole game, only attempted 16. And of those 20 free throws, Harden hit 16. So he still had a double-double, 21 points and 10 assists. I understand it wasn't a good shooting night, but he still got his. I can't go too crazy. Russell Westbrook showed up. He dropped 25. Eric Gordon dropped 19. Like I said, the Rockets weren't awful in this game. They played good perimeter defense. But at the end of the day, they're really no match for this Lakers team. You take a look at points in the paint, the Rockets only had 24. The Lakers had 62. In rebounds, the Rockets had 26. The Lakers had 52. The Rockets only had 1 offensive rebound. The Lakers had 12. Second chance points, 3 for the Rockets, 17 for the Lakers. Fast break points, 2 for the Rockets, 19 for the Lakers. This was a terrible matchup for Houston. I said it from the outset. And I think what we've learned is that while you certainly can use small ball to get you to the promised land, you still need to have the ability to match up with a team from a size perspective. If the Rockets still had Clint Capella, I think it's a fair bet to say that the Rockets would be in much better shape. But now it's time to preview the two games tonight, and I'll start with Nuggets-Clippers. For the Nuggets, there's really not much they can do. They're down 3-1. I don't think the Clippers are blowing this. The one thing I would say is take it one game at a time. Don't get too ahead of yourselves. And try to get Jamal Murray more involved. He's had a tough time against Patrick Beverley. But at the end of the day, we know how dominant he can be. This is a guy who, a while ago, I was saying was turning into one of the best young guards in the NBA. Now, I don't think you can say that. If the Nuggets are going to have any chance of prolonging this series, they need Murray to get at least 20. At least. That's the bare minimum. As for the Clippers, just keep doing what you're doing. Try to get everyone involved. The reason I picked the Clippers to win it all was because of their depth. I don't think anyone can match up with them 1 through 9. In no particular order, Lou Williams, Kawhi Leonard, Montrezl Harrell, Landry Shamet, Paul George, Patrick Beverley, Ivica Zubac, JaMychal Green, and Marcus Morris. You can't get much better than that. The Clippers need to get all of those guys involved. I'm not saying they each need to score a bunch of points, but just contribute, whether it's offensively or defensively. That's what got the Clippers here in the first place. Don't reinvent the wheel. Moving on now to Celtics Raptors. And both teams need to get big contributions from their big guns. And each team has had a big gun that's been slipping recently. For the Celtics, it's Kemba Walker. Walker in Game 6 was atrocious. I went through his stats yesterday. I'll do it again. 2 for 11 from the field, 1 for 6 from beyond the arc. He played 51 minutes, and he only had 5 points. That is terrible. I promise you, Kyrie Irving would have done a lot better. He really hasn't been great this series. Game 3, he played great. Alright, I'll give him that. But other than that, he's been a major disappointment in this series. He's only shooting 30% from 3. In the regular season, he shot 38% from beyond the arc. That doesn't work for me. Walker needs to show up in this game. It's just that simple. And the Raptors need Pascal Siakam to show up. This guy is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. But much like Kemba Walker, he's had one great game. In this case, it was Game 4. And then that's been it. And even then, in Game 4, he only shot 2 for 13 from beyond the arc. He was penetrating. He had a double-double, 23 points and 11 rebounds. You can't get upset about that. But 2 for 13 from beyond the arc. That's terrible. He's only made 4 threes in this whole series. In the regular season, he hit 36% of his threes. The Raptors could really use a big game from him tonight. Moving on now to hockey, and I cannot believe that the Stars won that game yesterday. The Golden Knights were by far and away the better team. If you take the second period out of the equation, the Stars only had 9 shots in the whole game. To put that in perspective, in the first, second, and third periods, the lowest shot total the Golden Knights had was 10. That was in the second period. I mean, they're really playing Islanders hockey here. They're playing defense-first hockey. The thing is, they're actually doing it well. And the overtime goal by Radulov was a thing of beauty. Great pass by Pavelski. Great snipe by Radulov. At the end of the day, the Stars converted on their opportunities. The Golden Knights had their fair share of opportunities. They had 40 shots in this game, but they made Anton Khudobin look like the second coming of Marty Turco. I mean, he made 38 saves in this game, and some of them were really impressive saves. I'll give Khudobin credit. I still think he's a backup goalie, but he's been having a great playoffs. The biggest question that I have going forward in this series is who's going to start for the Golden Knights. Can you start Lehner after that performance yesterday? He faced 23 shots and gave up 3 goals. I wouldn't be upset if Pete DeBoer went back to Marc-Andre Fleury. But the one thing I'll say is, if you go back to Fleury, you have to stick with him if he plays well. Don't let this be a maintenance day for Lehner. If Fleury stands on his head, let him get the start after. I fully believe in riding the hot hand when it comes to goalies. I would say that it's time to preview Lightning Islanders, but I don't know what there is to preview. This series is over. The Lightning are by far and away the superior team. It's not even close. I mean, I really think this series is over for the Islanders. I don't think there's anything they can do to realistically come back in this series. You want to tell me if they win tonight, it puts the series in a whole new light? Okay, fine. You're right. But what gives you the confidence that they are going to win tonight? I mean, I'll tell you. I really think the Lightning are going to come out victorious. It kills me to say it, but it's the truth. You want to tell me I've given up and I shouldn't do that? At the end of the day, the team needs to give me a reason to not give up. I mean, realize it's very tough for me to say this. I picked the Islanders in 6. No one was happier than me to see them in the conference finals for the first time since '93. But they took all that joy away from me very, very quickly. And I'll say this. If the Islanders lose tonight, I'm not watching them on Sunday. Football's back. I want to watch the Jets. I want to watch Tom Brady's first game as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Even if it's a 10-0 Islander victory, it means nothing. They'll still be down 3-1. If they're down 2-1 after tonight, I'll watch. But if they lose tonight, I'm not watching. It's just that simple. Moving on now to Texans-Chiefs. And what else can I say other than the Chiefs are who we thought they were? Mahomes was sensational. Completed 75% of his passes. He only threw for 211 yards, which is a little surprising. That's a little low for Mahomes, but when you throw 3 touchdowns, I don't mind that. And I said I was interested in seeing how Edwards-Helaire would do against this stout Texans front seven. Let me tell you, he impressed me. 25 rushes for 138 yards. That's a 5.5-yard average. He had a touchdown, which will make his fantasy owners that much happier. And I really like how Mahomes spread the wealth around. Sammy Watkins had 7 catches. Travis Kelce had 6. Tyreek Hill had 5. Demarcus Robinson had 3, but he was targeted 6 times. I mean, I'm going up against Watkins in one of my fantasy leagues, so it upset me to see him go off that much. Especially when he gets the touchdown called back, and then 2 plays later, he gets the touchdown right back. I mean, that was really infuriating. But I do have Travis Kelce in my other fantasy football league, so it all evens out. The one thing I would say is I don't like how the Chiefs' defense folded in the fourth quarter. They allowed 2 touchdown drives within 5 minutes of each other. They were up 31-7 after the Tyreek Hill touchdown. And then you blinked, and it was 31-20. It's like, whoa, wait a sec. Do I actually have to pay attention to this game again? Are the Chiefs really going to blow this? Then Mahomes milks the rest of the clock, and the Chiefs got the win. I did say the Chiefs would win. I mean, that wasn't a bold pick or anything, but I was right. I was wrong on the spread, though. The Texans did not cover the spread. I mean, when you look at the Texans, Deshaun Watson was good, not great. He was responsible for 2 touchdowns, but also had an interception. He was sacked 4 times. Not the best game I've ever seen from Watson, but definitely not the worst. David Johnson played well. 11 rushes for 77 yards and a touchdown. He should have been used more on the ground, but the Chiefs had a 10-point halftime lead. And then they quickly turned it into a 17-point lead. So that put the kibosh on Johnson contributing on the ground. Deshaun Watson did a great job of spreading the football around. 7 players had a catch for the Texans. But the only one who really impressed me was Will Fuller. 8 catches for 112 yards. I mean, I was staying away from the Texans receivers in fantasy. I think that's going to be a nightmare. I don't even know if you can trust Fuller going forward. It wouldn't surprise me if next week the Texans shied away from him and tried to get Cobb and Cooks more involved. And the league where my opponent has Sammy Watkins, he also has Randall Cobb. So, one good performance and one bad performance. It kind of evens itself out. There were a lot of people saying that the Texans really missed DeAndre Hopkins. You saw it in this game, blah, blah, blah. I really didn't see that. Would DeAndre Hopkins have made that much of a difference in this game? I'm not trying to diminish DeAndre Hopkins' talent. And it was a really bizarre trade, to say the least, for the Texans, but he wouldn't have made that much of a difference in this game. I think Bill O'Brien wanted to go with a more wide-open offense, where anyone can go off on any given day. And you saw that here. I think it's a fair bet to say that Will Fuller is going to take a step back when the Texans play the Ravens next Sunday. There is one other thing to discuss. Before the game, both teams came together for a moment of unity. They all locked arms at midfield. It stretched almost the length of the football field, and the fans at Arrowhead booed. A lot of people got really ticked off at him. Why are you booing? This is about unity. This is about wanting to be treated equally. You know, shame on you. And I understand why those people are saying that. I had no problem with what the players did. I actually thought it was kind of nice. At the end of the day, there's no greater cause than equality. I mean, I'll tell you, if I was there, I would not have booed. I probably would have applauded. Like I said, I had no problem with what they did. And I think it was the wrong decision to boo. By far. It's not even close. But let me just play devil's advocate for a minute. These people haven't seen football since February. They've gone through a pandemic where they couldn't go outside of their house. Now they have an opportunity to see their favorite team play, and you're gonna make a political statement? That's not what those people want to see. They came to see football. They didn't come for a discussion about politics. Now, having said that, if it's a universal political cause that everyone can get behind, like blacks should be treated the same as whites, or everyone should go out and vote, you shouldn't have a problem with that. But it can be a little frustrating to see sports and politics intertwine like this. Again, I wouldn't have booed. And I don't like that they booed. But I didn't take it as they're a bunch of racists. I took it as they just don't want political statements when they're getting set to watch a football game. Personally, I don't mind the athletes using it to further a universal cause. If it's something controversial, like, you know, pro-life or pro-choice or pro-death penalty or anti-death penalty, something really controversial, yeah, that's an issue. But if it's something that should be universally accepted, I have no problem with it. I actually really liked that moment of unity. I thought both teams did a great job with it. Alright, it is time for me to make my NFL picks for the week. Alright, to start off with, I'm going to go with the Seahawks -2 over the Falcons. I don't care that they're playing in Atlanta. I don't care if there were 70,000 Falcons fans in the stadium. The Seahawks are by far and away the better team. No home field advantage in the world could give the Falcons much of a shot in this game. The Seahawks are going to win by probably double digits, let alone less than a field goal. The second one, I'll give you a little bit of an upset. I like the Packers +3 over the Vikings. Not just to cover, but maybe to win. I understand that the Packers went through a tumultuous offseason by drafting Jordan Love and not giving Aaron Rodgers any help at wide receiver. And the Vikings are a really good team. But, look, the Packers still have Rodgers, they still have Aaron Jones, they still have Devontae Adams. Rodgers has made lemonade out of lemons before at the wide receiver position. He's going to have to do it again. He shouldn't be in that position, but he is. And I think he can keep it up. I'll give the Packers the points. And my last pick is the Sunday night game. I like the Cowboys -2.5 over the Rams. The Rams are going to be lucky to finish not in last place in their division. They got rid of Todd Gurley. Outside of Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, no one on that defense scares me. And I'm excited to see what Mike McCarthy can do as head coach of the Cowboys. You add him and CeeDee Lamb to this Cowboys offense that already had Prescott, who I applaud for being so open about his mental health issues. Shame on Skip Bayless. He should be suspended or fired. I have no respect for Skip Bayless after what he said, and I had very minimal respect for him to begin with. Ezekiel Elliott is still there. Amari Cooper is still there. Michael Gallup is still there. Blake Jarwin's still there. The offensive line, for the most part, is still there. Defensively, they still have DeMarcus Lawrence. They brought in Trayvon Diggs. I like the Cowboys at -2.5. So my picks are Seahawks -2, Packers +3, and Cowboys -2.5. Alright, here's my interview with Rebecca Edwards. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Rebecca Edwards, the author of Deaf Players in Major League Baseball, A History, 1883 to the Present. Rebecca, welcome. How are you?
Thanks. I'm very well. Glad to be here.
All right. So this is kind of a niche topic. I'm sure you were kind of surprised to get my email when I reached out to you. I feel like I should qualify myself first as to why I wanted to interview you. So I have a friend who I've known for a long time. His name is Jim, and he used to work with deaf kids as a teacher for a really, really long time. So, he could tell you some horror stories about things that he saw. I'm sure you have your fair share of horror stories, and obviously the triumphs there also of how these deaf kids have persevered through their disability and have gone on to live great lives. But I'm curious, why did you decide to write this book?
Oh, well, good question. I decided to write this book because I teach at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and RIT is home to NTIT, which is the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. So about 10% of our overall student body at the university is deaf and hard of hearing.
Really?
Yeah. So we have a lot of deaf students. Like, I regularly have deaf students in my history classes, regardless of what the topic is, just whatever classes, because we have such a significant population of deaf students. So one of the classes I teach at RIT is actually a class on the history of baseball. So in part, it was having so many deaf students who'd be in that class, and if there was one person they all knew about, which after a while I realized was surprising, it was Dummy Hoy. And the reason it's surprising is that, of course, these are, current 18-year-olds. And Dummy Hoy last played in 1903. I don't have too many hearing students, who come up to me to ask questions about, ye old-time hearing baseball player who last played in 1903. To get past, Babe Ruth, they don't know anybody. That's like the earliest player they know, right? So the fact that the deaf kids are all asking about a person who played even further back in time, and they all know his name, and they want to know what I know. It made me realize that I did know some things about Hoy, but I realized if I was really going to keep teaching that course at RIT, I kind of needed to up my game. I needed to know more.
That sounds like a fun course. I would take the history of baseball.
Anytime. It is a really fun course, actually. The kids think, a lot of the times coming into it that, it's going to be like an endless conversation about who was the best team of all time. And then they find out it's actually some history.
Oh, darn it. You actually have to do work? Oh, no thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So what can you tell us about the Ohio School for the Deaf?
The Ohio School for the Deaf is sort of what I think of as the place where it all began, because when you first get deaf men who start playing baseball professionally, and initially that's in the minor leagues or with barnstorming teams, so playing for money, making a living at it, but not necessarily major leagues yet. Nearly all of them came out of the Ohio School for the Deaf. It was the first residential school in the country to adopt baseball as a team sport for the boys. And so they were being early adopters. They turned out to be, for a brief period of time, think like 1870s and 1880s, like a little baseball Midwest powerhouse. They just produced, all of these guys who went out there and started appearing on minor league rosters, and then eventually on major league rosters as well. So, really important place. Still exists, of course. Haven't produced a major leaguer in a long time, I don't think. But
they're just saving them. They're just saving their energy to produce the best one yet.
That's right, maybe. But yeah, that's the Ohio School for the Deaf. It's an important place.
So one of the players that went there and ended up playing in the majors was a man by the name of Ed Dundon. Can you lay out his career?
Yeah, Ed Dundon was actually the first deaf man to appear on a major league roster. And it's kind of interesting because my deaf students, they don't remember him. For the deaf community today, all the attention goes to, turns out to be Dundon's teammate at the Ohio School for the Deaf, which is Dummy Hoy. But Dundon was actually the first. So sort of in my thinking about his career, he's sort of like the Moses Fleetwood Walker of the story, right? He actually breaks into baseball first, but then as we look back, everybody thinks it was Jackie Robinson, right? That kind of story. And in fact, he was a contemporary of Moses Fleetwood Walker, who was the first African-American player to appear on a Major League roster. And they both appeared in the same league. Both men played in the American Association. Dundon played out of Columbus. But I think part of the reason it's not remembered is that Dundon's career was brief by comparison to later players, and wasn't incredibly successful. He was a pitcher, wasn't a great pitcher, so it didn't last particularly long. But important because he's the first. He'll always be the first. You know, no one can take that from him.
No, of course. Talking to Rebecca Edwards, the author of Deaf Players in Major League Baseball, A History, 1883 to the Present. So when I was reading the book, and I did read it, I did enjoy it, and I actually gave it to I gave it to my friend Jim, and I know he's going to get a kick out of it. I came across a couple names that I was kind of fascinated by, names I had never heard of before. Okay. Would you be able to describe the careers of John Rynne and George Kim?
Yeah, John Rynne. John Rynne was sort of the best deaf player who didn't make it, I guess, for lack of a better way of thinking about Rynne. Just a strong player, powerful player, but a player who ends up suffering an injury, breaks out, contemporary of Dundon, breaks out in the 1880s. They're both playing in Ohio State, various leagues there, Ohio State League, the Southern League, and he's doing incredibly well in the late 1880s particularly. Starts to attract the attention of higher up minor leagues, shall we say, out of Minneapolis, goes to play in Minneapolis, does really well. It's looking like he and Dundon may come in together to the majors, and then Rynne suffers an injury that never really heals, and he watches his friend Dundon go on without him, basically. It's sort of heartbreaking in the end. George Kim actually is a better-known player, I think, in terms of minor league. Has a long career in the minors, plays like, where doesn't he play? Plays in Ohio, plays everywhere. Plays in Ohio.
He racked up frequent flyer miles before anyone knew what frequent flyer miles were.
Yeah, exactly. Ends up playing also in the American Association, which by that point has gone back to being a minor league. So misses his moment in the majors there. But he becomes like this incredible fixture in the late 80s into the 90s, and then plays into the early 1900s. So he has a long career, unlike Rynne, stays healthy, becomes kind of like the old man of baseball. His teams, toward the end of his career, end up promoting him because he's so well known around his mustache. This year he has a mustache again. It's like classic minor league kind of shtick. Come see George Kim, or come see George Kim play. He shaved his mustache. He's looks so much younger now, and he's hitting like a young man again. This kind of stuff. What I love about that is it's like classic silly minor league stuff. The stuff we all love about minor league baseball. But what I love about it is it has nothing to do with the fact that he's deaf. A well-known personality, and they can just promote him as who he is, and not as like this unusual attraction or something. He comes off as a full human being. So it's very nice.
Good. I like hearing that they didn't make a huge deal out of him being deaf. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So what can you tell us about Dummy Hoy?
Well, Dummy Hoy is probably still, I'm guessing, I guess you could tell me better than I can tell you in a sense. I'm guessing he's still the best known deaf player. If you'd already known a name, you probably knew his name, yeah?
Yeah, I knew Dummy Hoy, and I knew Curtis Pride. I'll get into my Curtis Pride story a little later, but I did know Dummy Hoy. That's
fine. I assume anybody knows anybody in the story. It's going to be him.
Here's the interesting thing about Hoy. he's still 19th all-time in the majors in terms of career stolen bases. He's ahead of Ozzie Smith. He's ahead of Davey Lopes, Cesar Cedeno, Jose Reyes. People don't remember, he had a great career.
He had a great career. That was part of my emphasis in putting together 2 chapters on him, because I just think when you really start digging into his numbers, like you're saying, like, why is his name still? The man hasn't retired in 1903, right? To still be 19th, to still be top 20 on that list, you haven't knocked him out. You've had over 100 years to knock him out. To sink him out of the top 20, and he's clinging right there. I mean, he has great numbers. I think just great numbers in some cases, as you just said, but I think also great numbers in terms of his peers in his overall career, right? To compare him to other 19th century players. If he comes up in 1888, to have that career among his peers, he had a great career. It's a kind of a tragedy that he's not better remembered. He should be better. He deserves better.
Oh, of course. Here's the thing about Hoy. In his rookie year, 1888, he led the National League in steals with 82. I'm sure someone else has done that, come up and led the majors in steals their first year. I think Vince Coleman may have done it, but that's still really impressive. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think part of the problem is twofold. I think it was a long time ago. Even baseball memories, even in a sport that lives, dies, and breeds statistics, and is obsessed with its own past. By the time you reach back to 1888, that's kind of hard, even for baseball people.
Right.
Keeping those players in the conversation, even for baseball, is hard. And then also he's deaf, and so I think the core constituency who's keeping his memory alive is a minority community in the U.S., and so they keep a flame burning for him, but I don't know that a lot of hearing people are aware of that.
Is that why he was nicknamed Dummy, because he was deaf?
Yes, and at the time,
when
he was getting that nickname in 88, deaf people as a group, not just him, were referred to as deaf and dumb, and at that time it meant deaf and mute. It was supposed to be signaling that these are people who don't talk, right, or who communicate by sign language. So he tended to take Dummy in that spirit in which he liked to believe it was intended. Later players who came after him, Dummy as a word at that point was starting to move more toward meaning what we take it to mean, which is stupid, and they therefore didn't really think much of that nickname.
Let me ask you this. If you had a Hall of Fame vote, would you cast a vote for Hoy?
I would.
I think I would too. So is Hoy the main reason for umpire signs?
I argue yes. It's a bit of maybe a controversial argument, because for years in reading baseball accounts, it was always denied that Hoy had anything to do with it. If you read kind of standard mainstream hearing, for lack of a better word, accounts, most of the time the credit goes to umpires themselves, that umpires developed these signs and codified them and birthed them. The argument is always about who, right, which one of them contributed more, but it's always a conversation that just involves generations of hearing umpires. But no, I think actually it was Hoy. I think doing the research here for this book kind of really brought that home to me forcefully. Those were his signs, and umpires adopted his signs.
Talking to Rebecca Edwards, the author of Deaf Players in Major League Baseball, A History, 1883 to the Present. So can you lay out the life of Dummy Taylor?
Yeah, Dummy Taylor, he briefly overlapped with Hoy, the tailors of Hoy's very long career. Dummy Taylor pitched for the New York Giants from 1900 to 1908. They, in fact, faced each other one time, did Taylor. Taylor was a pitcher, and in one game, That was Taylor on the mound and Hoy at the plate. That is the only time a deaf pitcher and a deaf batter have faced each other in Major League Baseball history. Win a bar bet, you're welcome. So that's a moment right there.
You have a good sense of humor. That's good.
Thank you. But Taylor was a very good pitcher. I think part of the reason he's overlooked is actually less because he's deaf and more because he's a pitcher in the Giants in 1904 and 1905. So who's he pitching with? Christy Mathewson.
Right. Yeah, you're going to get overshadowed by Christy Mathewson. I don't care who you are. You're getting overshadowed by Christy Mathewson.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and then you're also pitching with Joe McGinnity. You're
right.
It's not getting any better for you, right? Yeah. So I think that's actually what's kind of suppressed our memory of him. It's just he's a very good pitcher, but he's just surrounded by,
Hey, in 1904, he won 21 games and didn't even lead his team in wins. How crazy is that?
That is crazy. And then then you think that's so sad, right? And he has this guy who has 21 wins. You'd be thinking, wow. And then instead you're like, well, he's no Christy Mathewson. Right? Give the guy a break. It's a great year. 21 wins is nothing to sneeze at.
Right. So what can you tell us about the 1901 Giants?
That was what I would call the deafest year in Major League Baseball history.
Okay.
The Giants alone have 3 deaf players, all of whom it turns out are pitchers. So that was also kind of interesting. And at that point, in 1901, Dummy Hoy is still in the majors. So you had 4 deaf players at the same time in Major League Baseball, and there have never been that many deaf men to play Major League Baseball at the same time before that, and certainly never since. I mean, after that, it's after Taylor retires, there's a long stretch where there's nobody. There are no deaf players. And then after that, it's only ever been, one in the entirety of Major League Baseball at a time. So that was the high watermark, I guess we'd call it.
And we'll get into one of the more recent deaf players now. Still not too recent, not too many people alive that saw him play, but I'm sure there's a handful of them. Would you be able to describe the career of Dick Sipek?
Yeah, I I went into this project, he being the player I probably knew the least about going into it, and then came out kind of being way more impressed with him than I thought going in, if that makes sense. Sipek was actually discovered by Luther Taylor, which I hadn't known. So that's an interesting, bit of a deaf pipeline. Taylor was still doing some work scouting.
Okay.
And found Sipek and brought him to the attention of major league clubs, most of whom passed. And then he finally reached out to the Cincinnati Reds because he still knew a couple of people in that organization. And they were like, well, if you think he's good, we think he's good. And they brought him, Sipek, into their minor league organization. And he makes it up during the war, during World War II. Mostly, I think historians have been unkind to him, and a lot of other players in that era too, for that matter, because they're thinking, well, it's World War II.
The talent pool is lessened. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't think that is true in the aggregate. I don't think it's actually true in Sipek's case. He had a great deal of talent. I think he had a lot going against him, which is particularly by the 40s, the deaf community was even more sort of a minority group that was not very well understood by hearing people. I think they had lost kind of public prominence from 1901. When you have so many deaf players into the 40s, and I think his team did not really know what to do with him. Not his teammates, who I really liked him, but I think organizationally, like the idea of working with a deaf player, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and it showed he only got in 82 games. Wasn't terrible. He had 244.
But he didn't get an opportunity to show. He doesn't really get a chance to show what he could do.
Right.
What can you do in 82 games, in 82 inconsistent games? Like, you're in, you're out. You don't appear for games. Suddenly we throw you in. Right? You don't really get a chance to demonstrate what you're capable of in those circumstances. And I think that certainly didn't help his chances.
Talking to Rebecca Edwards, the author of Deaf Players in Major League Baseball, A History, 1883 to the Present. And Rebecca, I'll get you out on this. The only deaf player I ever saw live, I'm not that old, but I saw Sipek or Hoy or Taylor. Can you lay out the career of Curtis Pride?
Yeah, Curtis Pride. Curtis Pride is probably, I'm guessing you are correct, he is probably the deaf player that current fans remember. No. Would that be right? Yeah.
Certainly there are more people around that saw him play than anyone else. Yeah,
I think that's right. I mean, he comes up in 1993, comes to the Expos. I always like the Expos. Just a soft part for the Expos.
People forget in the mid-'90s, the Expos were actually pretty good. If there wasn't that,
the strike
screwed them over. Yeah, and the strike screwed the Yankees over too.
Yes. No, for real. So he was just happened to come up with them. Had been in the Mets, brought up into the Mets organization. Was in the minor leagues with them. Then they let him go. So he ended up making his debut, the Expos, and it's an interesting moment because so many people had viewed it as historic at the time. That is, people knew at the time that it was a big deal that he was on a Major League roster, that there hadn't been a deaf player in Major League Baseball in so long, and that's what all the coverage was. But I haven't found any coverage, at least again to date, by the time I went to press. Someone out there may be sitting on an article and now they're going to out me. But at the time when I was finishing up, I couldn't find any articles from '93 that talked about the fact that he was the first black deaf player ever in Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
all the coverage was about how he's a deaf player. We have a deaf player. We haven't had a deaf player. And I was thinking, yeah, but you also never had a black deaf player. And I can't find anybody who mentioned that at the time. So I found that kind of curious. It was a way in which, like, the fact that he was deaf kind of obliterated everything else about him. You know what I mean?
Right.
In terms of remembering him, imagining him. On the other hand, they did a nice job, even in the 90s, of linking him to the right history in terms of deaf players. Somebody, Dick Sipek, that was his last, his burst on the scene when everyone had to write articles saying he's the first deaf player since Dick Sipek. And somewhere at that point, little old man Dick Sipek was like, I'm back in the news.
All the encyclopedias opened up to the Ed section, right?
Exactly. And, people, then sports writers were able to correctly reach even further back and, mention at least that Hoy had come before all of them. And it was nice to see, like, him associated correctly, with that deaf history. But it was a little bit odd that nobody mentioned that there had never been a black deaf player ever in the majors.
I didn't think of that, but you're right. He had to overcome two handicaps.
Mm-hmm.
You're 100% right. All right. Here's my Curtis Pride story. Are you ready for my Curtis Pride story?
So you saw him play.
I saw him play on July 6th. Who was he with? He was with the Yankees. He was playing the Red Sox. I'm a Yankee season ticket holder. July 6th, 2003. My father and I go to the game. We sit in our seats, and Bob Shepard is going through the lineup. And he says, and batting ninth, the right fielder, Curtis Pride. I will never forget this. My father and I looked at each other like, who the hell is this guy? We're two big Yankee fans. We've never heard of this guy.
No idea. Yeah.
We had no idea who he was. The Yankee bleacher creatures do roll call when the game gets started. So all the players acknowledge them, hey, how are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Pride doesn't hear it because he's deaf.
Of course. Right.
So what happened was someone went over to Pride. The bleacher creatures had no idea what was going on. Why is this guy not acknowledging us? This is your first game with the Yankees. You don't want to tick us off. So
Right.
someone went over to him. I don't know if it was Matsui, Giambi, Tori, but someone went over to him and said to him, "Hey, you have to turn to the bleacher creatures and wave, or else we're going to be here for a long time." And
That's a
eventually,
great story.
Oh, I'm not done. I have the kicker. Eventually, he waves. Fast forward a little bit to the bottom of the 6th inning. Pride is leading off. It's 3-1 Yankees. John Burkett on the mound. Pride hits a home run. So that was the only home run and the only hit that Curtis Pride had with the Yankees. So I did see it live.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You were there.
I was there.
Nice.
All right, Rebecca. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. That was Rebecca Edwards. Her book is Deaf Players in Major League Baseball, A History, 1883 to the Present. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. You are going to get my New York Jets preview at some point in time tonight. You're also going to get a Jets recap for Week 1. That's probably going to be posted late Sunday night. Possibly Monday morning, but most likely late Sunday evening. And that's how I'm going to do this for the Jets recaps. I'm going to tell you in the outro when you can expect them. Some days it'll be earlier, some days it'll be later. Regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show coming your way Monday afternoon and every weekday afternoon. You know the drill. You're also going to get a Yankees show on Monday evening. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that Mo Berg could speak 8 languages, but he couldn't hit in any one of them.